in Johannesburg is Loane Sharp from Adcorp. The Adcorp September Employment Index has been released. Loane, what happened? It seems to me that there's a little bit of optimism out there.
Yes, the domestic economy is doing relatively well. It keeps surprising on the upside. The purely inwardly focused sectors, the services sectors in particular, have done quite well from an employment point of view. Finance, retail and wholesale trade, even the construction sector for the first time this year added jobs. But apart from the inwardly focused sectors, the external environment remains very precarious. Mining and manufacturing employment dropped 14,000, but most of that was in the mining sector for the first time. So yes, it is a generally weak external environment with a somewhat surprising level of buoyancy purely domestically. But I think this is a once-off improvement in employment. I think for the rest of the year, employment looks weak.
Okay, it grew at an annualised rate according to your index of 1.61%. I mean, of course this is good news. It's much better than falling 1.61%. But on the other hand, what are the sort of numbers that we need to make a meaningful dent in the extraordinarily sad situation of employment in South Africa?
Well, it is a very sad situation. We need to create just 500,000 or 500,000 jobs per annum just to absorb new entrants out of the schooling system and the tertiary education system. We're not creating nearly the 40,000 jobs per month needed to do that, let alone the 100,000 jobs per month needed to meet the government's 5 million jobs target. So, even though we had a bit of a positive event in September, and there may well be, if the economy is surprising on the upside, there may well be a boost to employment as we head into the festive season, the December retail season. But I think most commentators are expecting the consumer to be subdued this year.
Yeah, I don't think that the South African experience tells us that the consumer can ever be very much subdued at around about that time of year. But what disturbs me is that if we're hanging our hat on the fact that we're going to be spending money that we don't have that creates short-term jobs, I don't think that's the right sort of jobs to be creating, is it?
No, you're quite right. In this stage of the economic cycle, we should already have observed a switch to permanent jobs, creation of permanent jobs. But overwhelmingly, the kind of jobs that are being created are temporary. And partly that's understandable because employers remain very uncertain about the future, and employers need lots of certainty before they start to make the commitments they make to permanent workers, for example. But we're noticing within Adcorp, our order books have never been as buoyant in our corporate history as they are at the moment. Agency work is growing hand over fist, and certainly disruptions created by strikes throughout the economy reinforce in employers' minds the case for outsourcing your labour relations risks.
You know, the Power Lunch headline of the day, the first one was that Jill Marcus has cautioned about labour unrest, and the obvious statement is that it will cause eventually a slowdown in economic activity and therefore more job losses. You say in your report today, turning to conditions in South Africa's mining sector, I'm quoting directly from your report, Adcorp's broad conclusion is that high wage settlements and problematic labour relations will lead to long-term job losses. These are not just short-term losses. These are not things like Anglo-American Platinum sacking 12,000 workers last Sunday or last Saturday, whenever it was, and then re-employing them. These are jobs that are lost and are lost probably forever.
Yes, the mining sector's become incredibly capital intensive. In 1960, our mines employed 1.4 million people. Today, that's fallen to 500,000. The ratio of capital to labour has increased by nearly 1,000% since the mid-1960s. So there's a tremendous amount of labour-saving capital equipment and machinery being introduced into the mining sector. And this is something true of the economy generally. We're racing to introduce automation and mechanisation and anything that will save us from labour troubles. in the context of incredibly high unemployment.
But that very mechanisation process, which is so prevalent in Australia, for example, in Western Australia, there are trains that are just controlled by somebody in front of a laptop like myself, just pressing a button and off the thing goes. You don't need the sort of labour, but that is going to cause a problem as well. I mean, the labour unions will be up in arms about this sort of process, and they will therefore put hurdles in the way of progress.
Yeah, I'm glad Amplats took took advantage of the opportunity to dismiss 12,000 workers. I think it was a very important signal from employers to trade unions about just how much they will tolerate of disruptions in production. Bearing in mind that Anglo Platinum was going to retrench workers anyway because of the declines in the platinum price. So they've now managed to dismiss them without paying any severance packages, which they would have had to pay if they were retrenching the workers. And they will probably re-employ, of the 12,000, about 7,000. And the advantage there is that all of those workers' lengths of service will be reset to zero. So all the benefits like bursary schemes, housing schemes, leave, all of these things connected to length of service will just be wiped off the screen. So I think our workers have still got a long way to go before they realize just how damaging strikes are to themselves.
Well, just pick up the Business Day this morning. I haven't got my copy with me. I thought I had it, but anyway, it talks about the Chinese owners of a South African gold mine. It will be sticking to contract workers in the future because it is becoming so onerous to employ people full time in South Africa. It's shifting and changing the environment so drastically long term. The short term stuff that's going on right now.
Well, I think the government, which was under pressure from COSATU's hysterical campaign against labour brokers, Jacob Zuma came to power and he must have realised or got the economic policy brief. More than 1 million workers are now employed through agencies. Nearly 4 million workers are employed on a temporary basis. And really fiddling with that sector is just not possible. I think it's interesting the Chinese Gold One have indicated they'll be using contractors. Most companies don't come as clean as that in public, but the trend toward outsourcing labour is growing apace.